Good evening, my name is Mikhail Baranov, and now for more details. On the eve of his visit to Washington, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Brussels, where he met with the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Later, a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing was also held in the format of a video conference. The main topic of discussion was security guarantees for Ukraine and fair conditions for ending the war, in the context of the recent meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska. In addition to Zelensky, the following leaders are traveling to Washington for the negotiations: UK Prime Minister Starmer, German Chancellor Merz, French President Macron, European Commission President von der Leyen, as well as Italian Prime Minister Meloni, Finnish President Stubb, and NATO Secretary General Rutte. Security guarantees for Ukraine mean having its own strong army. He stated this at a joint press conference with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The president emphasized that Ukrainian soldiers can be armed both through domestic production and European supplies. And Europe is capable of financing the defense forces, but there are certain types of weapons in short supply that only the United States possesses. That is why Ukraine needs close cooperation with all its partners. On the battlefield, Ukrainian troops have been holding the line for years, so when it comes to territorial issues, there can be no talk of surrendering Ukrainian regions. President Zelensky once again emphasized this. Support for Kyiv in the context of the upcoming meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump. Pressure on Russia and peace negotiations, these were the topics discussed today in Brussels by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. What important statements were made ahead of the meeting in Washington? Did Freedom's special correspondent in Europe, Vitaly Sezov, hear them? Next, his report from Brussels.
The European Union will introduce a new 19th package of sanctions against Russia as early as September. This was announced today in Brussels by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen after her meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Tomorrow, both of them will be in Washington for a meeting with US President Donald Trump. One of the main topics of the talks will be security guarantees for Ukraine.
First and foremost, it is incredibly important to consider
we must have reliable security guarantees to protect the vital security interests of both Ukraine and Europe. Ukraine must be able to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. There can be no restrictions on the Ukrainian armed forces, whether it concerns cooperation with third countries or assistance from third countries. No restrictions for the Ukrainian armed forces. As I have often said, Ukraine must become a steel porcupine, indigestible for potential invaders.
The President of the European Commission emphasized that she is against changing internationally recognized borders and that Ukraine's defense needs must be met. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated ahead of his visit to Washington that he likes the idea of receiving security guarantees from the United States, but he wants to hear concrete details.
It is important that America agrees to work with Europe on guarantees and security for Ukraine, and we are grateful to the United States and the President for this signal, and therefore to everyone in Europe as well. This is a significant change, but there are no details about how it will work, what America's role will be, what Europe's role will be, or what the EU can do. And that is our main task. We need security to work in practice, like Article 5 of the NATO Charter, and we see joining the EU as part of the security guarantee.
After the bilateral meeting between Ursula von der Leyen and Volodymyr Zelensky, there were online negotiations among European leaders in an expanded format of the Coalition of the Willing in order to jointly develop a strategy to prepare for President Zelensky's visit to Washington tomorrow.
The goal of this meeting is to clearly define what security guarantees we want, what next steps need to be taken, and how to organize the next meetings with Putin, Ukraine, the US, and Europe. Another objective is to develop a strategy for maintaining pressure in case Putin does not attend the trilateral or quadrilateral meeting, and to determine our next steps.
In turn, Germany stated that they will also not leave Ukraine alone on this difficult path of upcoming negotiations. This was stated by the country's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Johann Wadephul. According to him, the strong support that Zelensky receives from European partners and the President of the European Commission demonstrates Europe's unity.
Germany firmly stands on the side of Ukraine. We will not leave President Zelensky alone on this difficult path of upcoming negotiations, but together with him we will defend international law. We are defending the freedom of Ukraine and, in doing so, the freedom of Europe. We will make every diplomatic effort to ensure that this week is a good one for Ukraine and a good one for freedom in Europe.
Let me remind you, the American leader invited the President of Ukraine to the White House after meeting with the Russian dictator Putin in Alaska. Zelensky will be accompanied in Washington by European leaders. As announced by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the meeting at the White House will discuss peace efforts, security guarantees, territorial issues, and further support for Ukraine. Vitaly Sizov from Brussels for Freedom TV channel.
Russia does not want peace, but the capitulation of Ukraine. This was stated by French President Emmanuel Macron. He noted that Europe and Ukraine must stand as a united front. Macron emphasized that the Russian war in Ukraine has already been going on for 3 years. And if concessions are made to the aggressors, there will be a new conflict in Europe. The French president believes that after such an aggressive war, it is unacceptable to demand that Ukraine surrender territory or reduce its army.
Any agreement to reduce the Ukrainian army would be doomed to violation, since Russia has never kept its promises regarding peace. Such agreements have already existed in the past. And even when Russia itself signed non-aggression treaties with Ukraine, as it did in 1994 with the Budapest Memorandum, it did not honor them.
The United States is not pressuring Ukraine to hand over all territories occupied by Russia. A future peace agreement will not include such concessions. This was stated by U.S. Secretary of State Mark Rubio in an interview with NBC News. He named 3 key elements of a potential agreement to end Russia's war against Ukraine. According to Rubio, it is necessary to discuss what the territories and borders will look like, how the reconstruction of Ukraine, destroyed as a result of Russian shelling, will take place, and another key point: security guarantees for Ukraine in the long term to prevent a repeat invasion in the future. Rubio also spoke about Russia's unreasonable demands.
No conditions should be imposed on Ukraine. They will have to accept some things, but they will also gain something. For example, Ukraine is a sovereign country. Like any sovereign country in the world, it has the right to enter into security alliances with other countries to prevent future invasions and threats to its national security. This is not an unreasonable request. It is something that needs to be worked on.
A strong Ukrainian army is the best guarantee of Ukraine's security, said the French Minister for European Affairs in an interview with La Tribune Dimanche. Any desire by Russia to demilitarize Ukraine is unacceptable, emphasized Benjamin Haddad. A peace agreement must be accompanied by clear security guarantees to deter new attempts at Russian aggression, European officials insist. The United States is ready to participate in providing such guarantees. Nikita Skoblikov will provide more details.
The U.S. is ready to provide security guarantees to Ukraine. This was stated by White House head Donald Trump to European leaders. According to a source from the Wall Street Journal, during Trump's negotiations with Putin in Alaska, the Russian dictator allegedly agreed that peace agreements could include the presence of Western troops on Ukrainian territory to ensure a long-lasting and durable peace. European leaders consider providing security guarantees to Ukraine a priority.
We clearly understand that Ukraine must have reliable security guarantees in order to effectively defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. We welcome President Trump's statement that the United States is ready to provide security guarantees. The coalition of willing countries is ready to play an active role. There should be no restrictions on the Ukrainian armed forces or its cooperation with third countries. Russia cannot have a veto over Ukraine's path to the EU and NATO, according to a joint statement by European leaders on the European Commission's website.
Washington has not yet disclosed exactly what guarantees President Trump is prepared to offer Kyiv, but according to Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, it concerns a mechanism based on Article 5 of the NATO Charter, an informal accession of Ukraine to the alliance. This means that an attack on Ukraine would be considered an attack on the entire North Atlantic bloc, obligating allies to provide assistance, including the use of military force.
President Trump raised the issue of the Italian idea of security guarantees based on Article 5 of NATO. The starting point of the proposal is the definition of a collective security provision, which would allow Ukraine to receive support from all its partners, including the United States, who are ready to take action in the event of a new attack. European states remain united in their support for Ukraine at this stage of the negotiations. The path to peace is not easy, but it is important that it has begun. Giorgia Meloni is the Prime Minister of Italy, according to the government website.
In this context, when Meloni essentially acts as a spokesperson for pro-Ukrainian positions and conveys them to President Trump, Ukraine needs strong security guarantees. This is very important, which is why Trump, in principle, might listen to her, unlike many other leaders whom he simply doesn't want to see, hear, or even read their messages.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz considers the United States' willingness to provide security guarantees to Ukraine a major step forward. Right now,
The issues on the agenda are security-related, specifically how to ensure a lasting peace agreement with Russia. And the good news is that America is ready to participate in such security guarantees and is not leaving this responsibility solely to the Europeans. Of course, Europeans must also do everything in their power to ensure Ukraine's long-term security. From my point of view, this goes without saying. The participation of the Americans in this process, their willingness to be involved, is good news.
But the main guarantee of Ukraine's security remains its defense forces, so there can be no restrictions for the armed forces of Ukraine, according to the leaders of the Baltic and Northern European states. In their joint statement, it is said that the Russian dictator cannot be trusted and that only Russia bears responsibility for the war unleashed against Ukraine and for gross violations of international law.
To achieve a just and lasting peace, a ceasefire and reliable security guarantees for Ukraine are necessary. A peace agreement requires firm and concrete commitments from transatlantic partners to protect Ukraine from any future aggression, as stated in the joint declaration of the leaders of the Northern Baltic 8 countries on the website of the Norwegian government.
The discussion on security guarantees for Ukraine and ways to end Russian aggression will continue in Washington at the meeting between President Volodymyr Zelensky, Donald Trump, and European leaders on August 18th. Nikita Skoblikov for Freedom TV channel.
Five people were killed as a result of Russian shelling in the Donetsk region. Another 4 were wounded. 3 districts came under attack by the occupiers. In addition, more than 50 apartment buildings and private homes were damaged, as well as administrative buildings, a warehouse, and outbuildings. According to the regional military administration, in just one day, the Russians shelled settlements in the Donetsk region 38 times. The Russian army attacked the outskirts of Kharkiv. 3 people were injured. The Russians carried out an airstrike on the village of Lesnoy. One of the bombs fell on the cemetery grounds. The second munition hit a field near the settlement. In addition, using drones, the occupiers attacked the residential sector in the Kupiansk district. A residential house caught fire. The fire covered about 300 square meters. The fire was contained by rescuers. The Russian army continues to terrorize the residents of Kherson. The city is under constant fire from attack drones, artillery, and bombs. Russian FPV drones are deliberately targeting civilian vehicles and pedestrians on the streets. Drones are already being spotted on the Mykolaiv-Kherson highway. In this way, the enemy is trying to cut off evacuation and logistics.
Kherson, another massive drone attack on the Dnipro district.
Are there any wounded here present?
No one is wounded, right?
They've been taken away.
All of them, thank God.
At this time, volunteer Ihor Cherny is rushing to the hospital to evacuate a woman after she was wounded. Irina ended up in the hospital in March this year after a Russian drone attacked her right in the yard of her house in Antonivka. That's a suburb of Kherson. Now it's one of the most dangerous areas where shelling never stops and Russian drones are constantly circling in the sky.
They
were hunting us.
We saw the drone hid under a canopy. There were trees and a big table. We hid under the canopy, but it saw us run there and started searching. It was literally hunting us. From above, it couldn't see us, so it dropped down to eye level. It saw where we were standing and dropped it right on us. Both my husband and I were hit. My husband was wounded less seriously, but my leg was shattered.
The woman has already undergone several surgeries. At the same time, even in the medical facility, it was hard to feel safe, Irina says.
Twice, in fact, it happened on 2 separate occasions.
While I was there, shells pierced the hospital wall, and the wall is 60 centimeters thick. My last nervous breakdown happened when shells hit a 5-story building near our hospital. All our windows were blown out. It was just Armageddon. It was so terrifying, just horrible. I was just waiting for the moment when I would be discharged.
The Russian army is shelling Kherson using aviation, tube, and rocket artillery. Russian attack drones are constantly and relentlessly hunting innocent civilians.
Drones perch on windowsills, land on houses near the hospital, and wait quietly.
Irina says there are still many civilians in Antonivka who want to evacuate.
My husband just stayed there.
In Antonivka, and my mother-in-law can't walk.
Let's
evacuate them.
But is that allowed?
Yes, that's allowed too.
They're just sitting.
Because my mother-in-law can only walk about 100 meters, and that's it. She can't walk any further.
There are
4 people there, they'll all come out.
a person with an agent.
And we attack. I break principles. That's what I do in my suit. That's me, Papa.
Look, F. Solomon, I protect, not now.
They say there are 60 people in Antonovka. Around me, where I live, we have 4, 6, maybe 10 people.
After being discharged from the hospital, Irina goes to her native village to see her mother. She says it's a long-awaited reunion after several years. She had a pre-stroke condition.
She has diabetes and high blood pressure. I told her, Mom, I'll come soon. They took off my Elizarov apparatus on Friday. She said, how? Are you coming with the rings on? I said, Mom, I'll take them off, then I'll come. I don't tell her exactly when I'll arrive. She says, all right, I'll be waiting. So I'm going to surprise her.
Kostya, she's the one who came running to us.
Mom, please go right ahead and cry, 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 cry. Thank you so very much, my dearest one, for your profound kindness and deep understanding in this moment.
Please take good care of yourself and remember to stay safe and healthy.
Irina still has to learn to walk again and go through a long rehabilitation after her injuries, but she hopes to spend this period safely with her family. Volunteers continue to help civilians relocate from the most heavily shelled areas of the city. Daria Litovchenko from Kherson for Freedom TV channels.
In Russia's Voronezh region, the infrastructure of the key Lysky railway station was struck on Sunday night. The operation was carried out by units of the main Directorate of Ukrainian Intelligence together with the State Border Guard Service and other defense forces. As a source in the Gyur told the UF Freedom TV channel, as a result of the strike, rail traffic through the station was disrupted. I should note that the Lysky hub is an important element in the logistical support system for Russian troops. Thus, as a result of the operation, the supply of ammunition and the transfer of personnel for the Russian Federation Army were disrupted. In the temporarily occupied Melitopol, which is in the Zaporizhzhia region, an operation by the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine destroyed an arsenal as well as a group of Russian soldiers. According to the main Intelligence Directorate, the explosion occurred at the moment a Russian truck carrying personnel entered the occupiers' deployment site in the industrial zone.
As a result, at least 6 Russian invaders from the naval infantry, as well as the crew of a UAV from the so-called Kadyrov battalion Akhmat Vostok, were eliminated. The exact number of irrecoverable and sanitary losses among the Russian occupiers is being determined. As a result of the explosion, an ammunition depot also caught fire. Sounds of secondary detonations were heard. From the report of the main Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine on Telegram.
Since the beginning of the day, 65 combat engagements have already been recorded on the front. As reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian units are actively working to disrupt the occupiers' plans and have achieved certain successes. More details about the situation on the front line in our report.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine noted the successes of Ukraine's defense forces in several directions. In particular, in the east of the country, Ukrainian forces liberated 6 settlements, destroying a large amount of military equipment and personnel belonging to the Russian occupiers.
As a result of joint actions by units of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and the National Guard of Ukraine, which are part of the 1st Corps of the NGU Azov in Donetsk region, the following settlements have been cleared. Hruska, Rubizhne, Novovodyane, Petrovka, Vesela, Zoloti, Kolodiz. Overall, as a result of active operations in the Corps' operational zone, the enemy has suffered significant losses in manpower and equipment, and this is a message from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram.
According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, most of the Russian assaults were repelled by Ukrainian soldiers in the Pokrovsk direction. In this sector of the front, since the beginning of the day, Russian invaders have made 27 attempts to push back the defenders from their positions in the areas of 13 settlements.
The enemy is still trying to strike there to break through to control the routes with firepower, Dobropilya, Kostyantinivka, but they no longer have operational control. And first and foremost, this means that the enemy's strategic offensive operation has failed.
In addition, the defenders repelled 1 enemy attack near Vovchansk in the southern Slobozhansky direction, 2 assaults each on the Siversk and Kramatorsk sectors. 3 each on the Novopavlivka, as well as the northern Slobozansky and Kursk directions. The General Staff also notes that as a result of active operations in the northern Slobozansky direction, Ukrainian units have advanced in several locations. In particular, in the area of Yablonovka in the Sumy region, the advance reached up to 1,000 meters.
That's right, that's right, that's right. They're running.
Ukrainian defenders shared details about the route of one of the Russian operations in the Kursk region. Let me remind you, in the spring the Russians tried to secretly move about 800 soldiers along a gas pipeline. Some of them suffocated from lack of oxygen while still inside the pipe, and those who managed to reach the exit were detected in time and eliminated. At that time, the operators from Ampere carried out dozens of sorties and drops over several hours, working, returning, rearming the drones with new munitions, and then heading out on the hunt again. And then Ukrainian artillery put a decisive end to this story.
Literally for an entire hour we were just waiting around.
2, 3, we held them back specifically in Ampere so that the enemy couldn't advance further to give our artillery time to target them with grads. We knew they might come out, but we didn't expect them to come out in such numbers. We thought it would be a small sabotage and reconnaissance group, maybe 10 or 20 people. They would come out to try to get behind our lines and disrupt our logistics in the villages further back. But we didn't expect so many of them to come out. At first, 30 of them came out, and then every time the guys flew over with the Mavics, they just kept coming and coming. At first, we would fly in, bomb them, pull back, and at that moment, our second group from the Vampire would move into position. It was like a carousel for us.
The soldiers also note that the Vampire bombers help destroy enemy equipment, especially at night. Operators say that Russian occupiers try to hide their artillery installations in forest belts, but aerial scouts find these hiding spots and relay the coordinates to the heavy drone operators.
For example, at an artillery firing position.
For example, some kind of artillery position? That is where the artillery is dug in, covered from above, and just sits there in a stationary position, so to speak. This means it's not going anywhere. When we find such a spot, we pass its coordinates along with accompanying photos and videos to the bombers, and they take it from there. And then at night, a buzzing thing comes flying at them, which is very hard to see or hear in the dark. Although you might be able to hear it, you definitely won't see it, and it drops a 120mm mortar round right on their heads.
Ukrainian forces also repelled 4 more Russian attacks in the Donetsk and Predniprovsk directions, 7 attacks in the Kupiansk sector and 5 in the Lyman sector of the front. The General Staff stated that all enemy attacks were repelled.
The Lyman direction is essentially a second tactical axis, where they are once again trying to create conditions for a strike from the left flank from the south. Of course, there are also very powerful offensive operations taking place there, but it's too early to draw definitive conclusions about their outcome. Neither in Pokrovsk nor in the Lyman sector, as they claimed, do they have any operational level advantages, none at all. Therefore, in this situation, we have stabilized this section of the front.
Ukrainian defense forces have eliminated 900 Russian occupiers over the past day. In total, since the start of the full-scale invasion, the Russian army has lost about 1,070,000 soldiers. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian defenders also destroyed 4 tanks, 8 armored fighting vehicles, 49 artillery systems, 1 multiple launch rocket system, and 1 air defense system the previous day.
Ukrainian armed forces soldiers are expanding the range of drone usage on the front line. Drones now not only deliver supplies and ammunition to the troops, but also help to clear mines from roads. Dangerous objects that the enemy deliberately leaves in the path of Ukrainian units are detected by aerial reconnaissance, which then relays the information to strike drone operators. These operators use drone-dropped charges to neutralize mines, clearing a safe path for infantry and vehicles. They restore, repair, and upgrade. While the combat units of Ukraine's defense forces carry out titanic work on the battlefield, there are those who ensure the operability of their military equipment every day. These are the specialists of the repair platoons. They often work in field conditions. Their task is to evacuate damaged Ukrainian equipment as well as captured enemy weapons from the front line in order to restore and upgrade them. Our journalists spoke with the mechanics of the 5th Slobozansky Brigade from Kiev, National Guard of Ukraine.
This is one of the captured Russian APCs that was brought to the Guardsmen for repair from the frontline positions in the Kharkiv direction. The armored infantry vehicle was still operational, but it needs to be adapted to the realities of the front, including installing protection against enemy kamikaze drones.
They has been given
them to us almost completely intact, and now they are fighting against their former owners. This vehicle has been through a lot, both in Donetsk region and in Kharkiv region. It has seen a lot of action and, so to speak, has delivered quite a few gifts to the enemy. Now we're working on it, welding it up so that drones don't terrorize us.
Right here in the workshop, the mechanics are overhauling the half-ton Kraz engine. The vehicle was hit in battle and evacuated by the repair battalion. The heavy-duty truck needs to be repaired as quickly as possible and sent back to the front line.
The brackets were broken. The covers and valves were also deformed. We had to repack and replace all of that.
In these archival shots, you can see the evacuation of this Kamaz from the line of contact to Kharkiv in March 2022. It took 6 months of work to repair the car with shot-out wheels, damaged cabin and chassis. In the end, the car even received its own honorary title.
Just a Morzik, why? He purrs and has never let me down. We transport timber and blocks, take out and install motors. This machine does absolutely everything.
Before the full-scale war, Ihor worked as a long-haul truck driver. He says he has considerable experience repairing heavy trucks. The first engine he repaired with his own hands in the workshop was from an MTLB. The serviceman recalls there was so much work that they worked around the clock.
We once upon a time
took it apart. We diagnosed the faults and immediately started on the second one. Spare parts would arrive. We assembled them, working day and night, constantly turning wrenches.
In 3.5 years of full-scale hostilities, we had to pull combat vehicles out of rivers, swamps, and deep ravines. And often this process was accompanied by enemy artillery shelling. However, the mechanics take on the task of restoring even those vehicles that are considered unfit for use.
They bring them in?
They bring them in. Some of them can't even make it here under their own power. They're brought in either by tow truck or on a trailer without wheels. With torn-off control arms, sometimes they were driving somewhere, fell into a ditch, went off the road, and smashed half the vehicle. Roughly speaking, the bodywork was destroyed. So they arrive without windshields, without windows. Some are used as donors, and some we try to restore, assembling something from those same donor vehicles. And then it keeps going.
The platoon commander of the repairmen with the call sign Little Zil has been in ISO since 2018. He went through the Luhansk and Kharkiv fronts, knows everything about armored vehicles, and is proud that he managed to assemble a team with golden hands.
A vehicle arrives.
It's a donor car. They say you have a week to repair it. But the next morning they call and say it should have been done the day before yesterday, so we have to work in 2 shifts.
The National Guardsmen say they can't name the exact number of military vehicles they've managed to repair since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but the count is in the thousands.
We do this for ourselves, for our families, and for all Ukrainians.
Natalia Belakudria from Kharkiv region for the Freedom TV channel.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.